And it's wonderful to be back at Brookdale. As I was telling Suzanne, and I don't mean this to be a disappointment for people, Brookdale was the best part of my education. And I'm afraid it was a little bit downhill after that because of the level of connectedness that I felt as part of this community and just the incredible teachers and peers I had. So before I get started, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm going to read some excerpts from the novel, and then we'll just open it up to questions. And if you have questions that come to you, just write them down so you don't forget them, because if you're like me, 5 minutes later, you'll completely have forgotten what you were going to ask. The Divorce Girl, in many ways, is a novel that's actually more like a love song to New Jersey. It's about growing up in New Jersey, in Central Jersey, in the mid-'70s. Working at the Englishtown auction, living in the Manalapan Englishtown area. And what I did is I took the frame of some of the things I lived and I inserted all new characters. And so it got fictional very, very quickly. And I always tell people that my main character, Deborah Shapiro, she's a little like me, but she's much smarter and taller. And she's not really a writer, she's more of a photographer, and that's how she finds her way. This is also a book, I'm sorry I'm going to wander as you're filming to get my tea close by. It's a book about making art and making community as a way to find greater meaning in life, as a way for somebody to find her way through a difficult time with many confusing options. And the first excerpt I'm going to read is one of Deborah's experiences in photography class. I think there's another chair right there. Come on in, get comfortable. She ends up taking a photography class that's held in the back room of a store called Clothes Consciousness. This is the mid-'70s, in a strip mall along Route 9. And it's taught by a somewhat eccentric character named Liz. And this is the first class she goes to. In the back room, kids sat around a circle of folding chairs, bean bags, and a green plastic bench. Liz directed me to a stool, although it already made me feel taller than usual. I recognized one of the girls on the folding chairs as Eshe, the most popular and wildest girl at my high school. She had had 2 abortions already. When a speaker at the school tried to warn us away from slides by flashing pictures of half-aborted babies, Eshe leapt to the stage, slammed his projector into the ground, screaming, "Get out of here, you motherfucker." Hope it's okay I'm cursing with you guys. It's fine. We're in Jersey. She was suspended for 2 days, but everyone admired her all the more. I also recognized Abby, a short girl I knew from synagogue, but I'd never really talked to, and a guy about my height with a long, dark ponytail down his back. He looked up and half smiled. A short, overweight boy next to him was playing with a calculator. He glanced at me, then turned back to his numbers. Liz plopped a plate of chocolate eclairs onto the table in the center of the room. "Whoa, boy, get a look at those doggies. When I'm going to shoot, I'm going to eat first, and nothing helps my artist eye like an eclair." When no one made a move toward the pastries, she added, "Hey, I'm not going to narc you out to your diet, doctor. Have one." She reached in and carefully lifted the largest eclair. The boy with the calculator looked both directions, took one, and everyone joined in. "Let me tell you where we are in the universe before we talk photography," Liz said. "This shop, left to me by my ex-husband, is right next to Dino's head shop. They buy mobiles and shit from India for pennies and sell it to you kids for dollars. On the other side is D&D Bagels, which stands for douchebag and dumb shit in my mind. Those Hasids think they're better than everyone else, but you know what they need?" A few of us shook our heads, and she answered, "Blowjobs." As she laughed, and so did the long-haired guy, the rest of us concentrated intently on our eclairs, blushing at the suggestive shape of the pastries. Last week, someone at school told me what a blowjob was, so I knew Liz was trying to shock us. I wondered if Mom had driven home already. Me? I've been all over, and that's why I can teach this class. You've got to see the world before you can really see it. I joined the Peace Corps, went to Tanzania to teach English, ended up showing women how to make potholders so they could stop burning their hands. You'd be amazed at what a potholder can do. Then I went to Paris, fell in love with Frank, and ended up riding the rails around Asia with him, buying and selling cheap clothing. He wouldn't stop using drugs, so I dumped him, moved to Australia, and met Rick, who owned the store. Next thing I know, I'm divorced and living in Jersey like I've never been anywhere. And what does this have to do with photography, man? As she asked. It's not like I don't dig your life story, but let's get on with it. She had a deep voice and long, wavy hair. I desperately wanted hair as thick and a voice as low as hers. I thought Eshy would be insulted, but she seemed delighted. That's what it means to be an artist. You don't take shit from anyone. She gave Eshy a high five. Okay, tell me your names quick and why you're here. I'm Mark, said the tall, ponytailed guy. I like seeing how what's in front of me changes into something else in a picture. Liz nodded like a satisfied doctor. I'm Abby, and I'm basically bored with my life. My parents said I should take this class, mostly so they wouldn't have to worry about me so much. Abby had deep dimples, the kind I always wished for. Taz, the guy with the calculator, blurted out. I call myself Taz, and I want to travel the world with my camera. No one's going to stop me either. Feel free to come on in and, find a seat or get comfortable. Eshy, and I'm here to take fucking pictures so I can sell them to the paper and make a few extra bucks. Liz seemed satisfied with this, too. I was last. My name is Deborah, and I like taking pictures, I said. And then I added quickly, I mean of trees. I had a dozen photo albums full of tree pictures. Usually I look straight up at the trees to show light filling the branches, like some of Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings I had seen. I try to get pictures looking at trees from angles that make them more interesting. The last part was a lie. No matter what angle I shot from, they always looked the same. Now I studied the pair of birches in the front yard while listening. I don't get the trees, said Liz, but whatever floats your boat. What I'm here to do is to make art, and that's what you got to do more than anything. You've got to make art out of whatever crap your life is giving you. That's what it's all about. Now, I'm not going to make you look at my pictures because I don't want you to be unduly influenced by the sway of my talent. We leaned forward seriously. I'm joking, guys. Let's shoot a few rolls of film of whatever is most wrong with your life. Get them developed and bring them back in 2 weeks. What do you mean by what's wrong with your life? Abby asked. I feel a little fat, so am I supposed to take a picture of my butt? Mark smiled as she laughed out loud. Take your butt and whatever else is messed up and don't censor yourself. This is about hunting down your life and shooting it. I nodded, but my mind was already spinning with ideas of where to aim my camera. According to the after-school special I'd seen on TV, the average divorce took about 6 months. I could photograph my parents' divorce and turn it into a story that would fit neatly in a photo album. Years from now, I could pull it down from the shelf, open it, and casually browse through the pictures. So that's a scene of Deborah, who's about 15, 16 at that time, in her first photography class. And as time goes on, she finds a way to make community by going to her synagogue and joining a youth group. How many of you were ever part of a youth group in a church and synagogue? Okay, so yeah, So, and, I don't know. In the Midwest, you don't talk about certain things out loud that you do talk about in Jersey, so I assume this will be okay. Now, there's intercourse, oral sex, and anal sex, the rabbi began, while the temple youth group members stared nonchalantly at the carpet. Fortunately, the shaggy sea of orange, green, and brown with yellow specks was so hideous, it was hard to look away. Intercourse you all know about. We nodded. The boy next to me, with blonde ringlets and freckled nose, pretended to be taking notes as he drew giant guns with little Martians holding them. A girl with long black hair parted in the middle and straight as a Breck commercial, Breck was a type of shampoo popular back then, looked at the rabbi as if she did know it all. Underneath the table, I could see her platform shoes bouncing up and down nervously. Abby, Mark, and a few of the kids I had met earlier were there too. Fatima, my dad's new girlfriend, had insisted I go to the youth group to meet young people. She was concerned that all I did was take pictures, watch TV, tag clothes for the Englishtown auction, and hide in the closet where I had built a dark room, moving sheets of contact paper from container to container. Last night over dinner, she told me I had to stop disappearing into that closet and spend time with other kids. Fatima talked about a church group that might work out too, if things didn't gel at what she called my Jewish church. Since I knew some of the kids and they had always been pretty nice to me, I decided to go for Fatima's sake. When I stopped at the temple with Dad to find out when youth group met, the rabbi shook our hands knowingly and ushered us into a small, dark, wood-paneled office. He was large and lumpy, with hair down to his waist and long, skinny legs. According to the tittering temple secretary, he had been thrown out of a New York synagogue for being too radical. Tea, he asked, flashing a collection of herbal tea bags. We shook our heads, but I was nevertheless entranced by the smell of apple cinnamon tea brewing in his McGovern in 72 mug. I see you're looking for the cup. Yes, I worked for McGovern. Since I lived in Rhode Island, I was campaign manager for 2 years. What a job, but that's what got me back to rabbinical school. Back, Dad asked? At least Rhode Island's a small state, I offered. Yes, to both of you, and back is right. I was thrown out of rabbi school for challenging the patriarchy, but isn't that what Judaism at its heart is all about? As soon as he got a chance, Dad explained some things to the rabbi, using some terms he probably heard on his talk radio shows. And we believe Deborah's clinically depressed, that she needs some activity to help her recover, and that religion would be a good activity for her. And we means your wife and yourself? The rabbi had a high-pitched voice and a huge stomach above his stick-like legs. It was easy to imagine him laughing or screaming hysterically. No, sir, I mean, Rabbi, my wife and I are divorced. Deborah lives with me. And the we? That would be myself and a woman I date, a woman who's like a mother to Deborah. The rabbi leaned back in his chair and sighed, as if the phrase, a woman I date, told him everything there was to know. I'd like to talk to your daughter alone for a few minutes, if you don't mind. I didn't mind at all. In fact, I felt like I had known this weird rabbi for a long time. He seemed like someone who had seen it all and yet wasn't turned off by other people the way I was. Fine, said Dad, standing up. I'll be in the hall. As soon as the door closed, the rabbi leaned forward on his elbows and looked into my eyes. His own eyes were green, and his face, although mostly covered in hair, looked younger than I imagined a rabbi's face could look. He would look good if photographed in natural light. I've seen some shit, he said. You can talk to me. I started to shrug, but stopped myself. I began to say, I'm okay, but that seemed pointless. I felt suddenly stupid. What was my problem? It just all seems so pointless, I managed to say. What seems pointless? Your parents' divorce? Your dad's girlfriend? This talk with me? I don't know. I guess my life in general. The rabbi breathed slowly. There was something about how sad his eyes looked and how slowly he breathed. I felt like he had been my neighbor for years, always joking around about the new bike or the baby. Inside me was a whole island of fear and dread, hidden behind good meals and dishwashing with Fatima. As I started to cry, I felt something reach through the air between us and gently place itself on my forehead. For a second or two, I didn't realize this imaginary hand was real. The rabbi had actually reached out and placed his palm on my forehead, like he was going to push me out of this world. But he didn't. He just watched me with quiet intensity.
As community outreach manager, one of the things I do is help hardworking families realize their dream of owning a home. Seeing the families that move into these homes that we build in partnership with our nonprofits, the kids finally have a place where they can bring their friends to. It gives them a feeling of safety and belonging. And I'm very fortunate that I work for a company that supports us in this. I started going to Brookdale because after a few years of marriage, I found myself a single mom. Brookdale gave me the opportunity to get back into school and give me some direction, and I'm very thankful. I'm Caryn Escobedo, Manager of Community Outreach for New Jersey Natural Gas, and I got my start at Brookdale.
My name is Lynn, he said. Seeing I was uncomfortable with that, he added, but you can call me Rabbi, and I'd like you to come speak to me once a week. We arranged it so I would meet with him for the hour before youth group, which he usually led. Now he was finishing his talk by explaining what cunnilingus and fellatio were, how anal sex could be particularly painful if enough lubricant wasn't used, and should only be pursued if both parties were in full agreement. Although no one said anything, I could tell just about every girl in the room, and a few boys too, were ready to throw up. He leaned back in his chair. Now that was a lot of information. Why don't we take a break so you can absorb it? Then you can come back and rap with me. I still need to tell you about homosexuality. Then ask me anything. Next week we'll talk about drugs, and believe me, I've done it all. We fled to the kitchen. The girl next to me, so small she could have been in third grade, yelled out, "That is so disgusting. I would kill anyone that tries to put his puts near my ass." She noticed me standing next to her and said, "Hi, I'm Amy, and that's Sam, short for Samantha," indicating a redhead in pink hot pants who was making gagging sounds. Amy handed me a stack of paper cups. As I uncoupled them to prepare pouring lemonade, I wondered why the temple would need 2 industrial refrigerators and a counter as large as a car. "Kill? I would die," said another girl. "I would just die." "I would turn into a lesbian first," Amy said. "What do you think lesbians do?" Sam asked. "I don't want to think about it. It's too sick." The other girl shuddered. I do want to just interject that this was the mid-70s before the internet, so it took a little, we had to get a little older before we found out all this stuff about sex. Just then, the blonde, curly-haired boy snuck up behind them singing a jingle from a local furniture store. You got to see Siemens first. Get it? Get out of here, Randy, you're gross. Standing behind that white counter, drinking lemonade and eating graham crackers, I felt like someone from another planet. The rabbi walked in with his teacup and opened the refrigerator. Echinacea, he said, holding up a vial of something cloudy. I grow it myself for the immune system. Anybody want any? No one did, so he plucked out an apple, closed the refrigerator door, and left the kitchen. And please feel free to come in. There's at least one chair here and some floor space. Get comfortable. How old do you think he is? Randy asked me. I don't know, maybe 30? My mom, interjected Sam, was on the hiring committee. She said he's 35, but he looks younger. He was thrown out of the New York synagogue for scurrying around with someone's wife. I heard it was because he protested the war, said Randy. My mom was on that committee and she loves him. I hope not that much, Sam shot back. Although the rabbi had introduced me as Deborah, a beautiful person, hardly anyone spoke to me, which I liked. I was shooting the scene in my mind, thinking about how it would look in prints. After we sat back down in our nervous chairs and listened to the rabbi talk about how homosexuals could have beautiful and meaningful relationships, I felt more invisible. Now, any questions? No one said anything. The rabbi started breathing slowly again. A trick he must have learned somewhere along the way. Maybe I needed a trick like that. It made people feel like they had to talk. John, a football player Jew who we all considered a bit of an anomaly, blurted out, "How do fags do it?" First of all, the rabbi began, fags prefer to be called gay. Second of all, if you remember all the things I told you about sex, how it can be intercourse, oral, or anal, you'll see 2 out of 3 apply to gay men. As for women who prefer to be called lesbians, there are mouths and artificial devices, and we all have our hands. Without thinking, most of us immediately took our hands off the table and sat on them. The gesture was so sudden, everyone in the room broke out laughing. "What about you?" asked Abby. "You'll just have to use your imagination," he replied. "Even better, don't." Now, any other questions? I covered sexually transmitted diseases and birth control earlier. If you have questions, let's talk. Someone asked him to explain what margin of error was, but before he could answer, someone else said, "That's what you are." He told us how condoms were made, how IUDs were mysterious and effective, and where Planned Parenthood was. Then it was time to go. On the way out, the rabbi caught my eye and winked. "So do you think he's gay?" "I mean, how else would he know this stuff?" said the kid ahead of me. Sam, the redhead, answered, "Nah, there's that story about him being with somebody's wife." "Could have been somebody's husband," the curly-haired boy whispered, and we all laughed again. On the drive home, Dad asked me what happened at the meeting. I thought for a minute and then said, "We talked about health stuff. It was kind of boring." So I have about 3 or 4 more pages. Do we have time for a little more reading? Or Okay, this is at Deborah's father's wedding, and he's marrying somebody named Janine. And the other thing you need to know is who Boy is. And Boy is actually fashioned after a real person named Ben Burnley, who at the Englishtown auction sold men's sportswear, and he was almost 7 feet tall. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful character in my life, and I kind of paid tribute to him by making a character a little bit like him. And so, I descended to the landing overlooking the wedding and started to aim my camera at everybody. Roger, my little brother, and Missy, my little sister, along with Sal, Janine's son, sat very still. Dad and Janine faced the rabbi, who uncharacteristically wore a suit but kept his long hair in a ponytail. Lou from the taxi service, Deborah's father owns a taxi service, wore only a fraction of the gold chains he usually wore, and he stood beside Dad as a best man. Janine's coworker Lena stood next to Janine in a loud orange dress. After I snapped some pictures of the wedding party from the stairs, I maneuvered to the living room to get a few shots of Dad and Janine's faces. Dad, thankfully, was not dressed in a pastel polyester leisure suit, this was the 70s, but a three-piece pinstriped gangster suit with a red carnation in his pocket. Janine wore a red nylon dress that made her look a little like Gladys Knight. I focused the frame close around them and pressed the shutter. After the prayers, the rabbi asked, "Do you, Janine Guadalupe Martinez Govidarian, take this man, Harold Hank Bernard Shapiro, as your lawfully wedded husband?" "So she'll be Janine Guadalupe Martinez Govidarian Shapiro?" whispered one of the taxi drivers with a slight grin. I caught that on film too. When Dad's turn came, he sneezed twice, a high-pitched sneeze like a yippy dog, which made everyone laugh. I tried to take a few more pictures, but by then I was out of film, and by the time I reloaded, it was over. Dad and Janine kissed unceremoniously and turned toward the crowd. I pointed and snapped the shutter in every direction. First Dad, then Janine, then both of them folded up in a spilling crescent of people, congratulating them with hugs and sly jokes. It occurred to me as I framed Dad smiling at Janine that one more wrong move would mean I was out on the street. "Bravo, bravo," Boy yelled. Without missing a beat, he poured out a perfect version of the Carpenters' "Close to You" in his loud baritone as the newlyweds smiled. Coming back to the kitchen where the party was in full swing and then back out to the living room, I found Janine's ex-father-in-law, a lanky man from India who spoke only scattered English, standing in the middle of the crowd singing in Tamil. He was linked arm in arm with Boy, who made up Tamilese-sounding words as they went along. Janine's mother, originally from Mexico, who had flown in from Texas that morning, filled up the couch. She wore a red velour tent dress, and her white flecked black hair in two gorgeous braids wrapped Heidi-style around her head. "Come here, baby," she said to me. "Come sit." So I sat next to her. "You are my new granddaughter, no? And you are a good girl. I can see that, a good girl." She put her arm around me. I could feel her warm body pressed against my side. "You are the granddaughter I always wanted. Everyone else gives me boys." "Oh, yeah, but you knew them since they were born." "No, that is not my meaning. You are my granddaughter, just as if I held you as a baby and all your life." She smelled like cinnamon, cayenne, and perfume, but the combination worked on her. I smiled and took her hand, and she whispered, "Eres mi nieta." Despite my strict orders to the contrary, I felt tears leaking out of my eyes and knew it was too late. She could see it all. I tried to make them stop by looking away and saying thank you, but she only leaned over to kiss my cheek. "Do you want a plate of food?" I finally managed to ask. "No, child, I have eaten while I cooked. You eat. You're so thin and such a beauty." She kissed me again as I extracted myself from the couch. I looked back at her briefly. She was smiling so broadly she squinted. Something inside rattled in me, as if I held onto a wishing well into which this new grandmother had dropped a coin. I had forgotten to have relatives, but hoped I could remember soon. I filled up a plate with fried samosa, enchiladas, turkey breast, yogurt sauce, tortilla chips, beef curry, chicken tandoori, and a slab of flatbread. I sat down next to Boy, who had a plate twice as full as mine. Lou winked at me from across the room. A few minutes later, the rabbi, who was carrying a Tupperware drink container, slipped over to say goodbye. "You can stay and eat with us," I offered, but he muttered he had a whole container of carrot juice already and needed to get home. He seemed bemused by the array of guests and told me we'd have a lot to talk about on Thursday. Boy shot to his feet and shook the rabbi's hand vigorously and said, "You Jews really know how to marry people and bury people. I think the Hebrews understand how to deal with grief better than anyone." "Well, you know how it is. We are the chosen people," the rabbi said jokingly. But Boy did not take it as a joke. "You are the chosen ones, and don't I know it? If there's such a thing as reincarnation, I'm coming back as a Hebrew, one of those Hasidic ones too. I think I'd look dashing with curly sideburns." After the rabbi departed, Boy and I went back to our food. "How long do you give it?" I asked. "Oh, the marriage? Let me calculate. About 5 years for her to mold him into the man she needs him to be, 5 more years for him to notice, another 10 to go back and forth in his mind about leaving her, then the rest of their lives, because by the time he gets tired of her, he'll be too old to do anything about it. Unless he goes the route my dad went, but to be honest, I don't think your dad has my dad's Kennedy-esque charisma." I was shocked by his precise detail, but I liked it anyway. "What about other women? You know, he can't seem to be faithful?" "Don't worry about that. Janine's the kind of woman who will make him faithful. She'll be by his side every minute, and she'll throw him enough curves he won't have time to get bored." "Oh, I wanted to know more from this man who saw all of life at the auction, where all of life was there to be seen." "So why didn't it work out with Fatima?" "Why? It's simple. She trusted him. And Janine doesn't? Not as far as she can throw him. And let me tell you something. She's got everything under control." "If you're so good at predicting futures," I said to Boy, "tell me mine." Boy stopped eating, leaned back, and studied me earnestly. "You're not such an easy read, but here's what I see. You'll have another year or so of hell, then you'll fly. Go to college, get a degree, meet some guy. You'll get a job teaching photography to some professor's crippled child or something. Get married, wait a while to have kids, have 2. You'll be happy, happier than you can imagine, much happier than those of us you're leaving behind." Boy's eyes were red, and I wondered when they turned that color. "Well, it sounds nice, but what about you? You said you wanted to become a lawyer, so are you going to go to college next year?" "Me? No, babe, that's just a pipe dream. I'm signed up for the long-term rags-on-the-road life." "It doesn't have to be that way. You could go to school, take classes during the week, work weekends. You could make it work." He shook his head and repeated, "No, I can't be a lawyer." "Yes, you can. Who says you can't?" "Who's going to run to Western Pennsylvania to the factory? Who's going to go down to D.C. to get the specials? My dad's too old and I've got to keep helping my sister. This is my life. Maybe in my Hasidic Hebrew life I'll become a lawyer." He laughed at himself. "A Hasidic attorney with a fat wife and 12 little Hebrew kids, all with those curlicues hanging around their faces." "You could take night classes. As your dream is to become a lawyer, you can do it. You shouldn't let anything stop you." "You," he said in a deeper voice, "don't know how to read people." He smiled and shook his big head. "Once a working class bum, always a working class bum. There's the Bolshevik and there's the bourgeoisie. That's the rule. You watch your whole life, you're only going to see a handful of exceptions." "Why can't you be the exception? You're strong enough." "Now you're reading yourself." He rose to his feet and stuck out an elbow. There was some kind of bad polka music playing in the living room. "Shall we?" I had danced the polka years before with my grandfather, but with Boy it came back fast. Every time I was ready to leap, he just lifted me up and tossed me to the next step. First came Beer Barrel Polka, then Dream Street Polka. We flew around the living room, now empty of furniture except for one couch reserved for the elderly who moved their arms and legs in time with the music. Every time a dance ended, a whole room full of my new relatives applauded me. Such a beauty she can fly, exclaimed my new grandmother. And so that's the reading. And